Hi, I'm Danny and these are my Diecast Disasters. And in this video I've got another wee car from Ken, who sent me the Corvette in my last video. And this is another Hot Wheels. This time it's a Baja breaker. Hot Wheels produced this model from 1978 until 2016, and this is a model from 1980. It's been around a while, and it looks like it. You can see it's got a bit of a grotty old patina on there. Got a plastic bonnet there. It's a bit scuffed, and yeah, plenty of oxidation, chipped paint. It's got one of those big thick metal bases, which is also pretty heavily oxidized. This was one of the first models with large black walls on the front and back. You can see they're looking a bit worn along with the windscreen, etc. There's one post holding it together, and you can see it's an outie, so I'm just going to use my punch here to mark a little mark for the drill. And there's a tab holding the rear on, which is kind of unusual for Hot Wheels. It's more of a matchbox trick. So I'll drill that post out, and then I can pop the base off and take it all apart. So it consists of the base there with the wheels in it and a black plastic interior. It's got the rear windows on it and this opening bonnet here. I didn't actually realise it opened until I'd pulled it all apart and noticed that there was a motor under there. And the windscreen there. And here's the casting. And you can see there's a quite nicely detailed engine in there. So I don't know, this was designed by Larry Wood and Bob Rosas. Like they went the extra mile on the details on this one for the early 80s Hot Wheel. They usually look like they just chopped out a block of wood and sanded it up, but this one's actually got nice panel lines and the engine in there. So this is it after I've stripped the paint off. You can see there's still a bit of paint left on there. It's almost like it joins with the metal with it as it oxidizes or something. Anyway, I'll give it a jolly good clean up with a wire brush on my Dremel. You can see it's starting to reveal some of the pitting that's on the model. Anyway, we'll keep going until that's looking nice and clean. I can use this smaller round brush here to get in the windows and other tight areas. Okay, here it is after burnishing. It's looking a lot cleaner. You can see the metal now. The pitting's not too bad, but on this side it is actually quite bad there. And on this door here, some quite deep pitting in there. So I'm going to have to do something about that. The other side's not too bad. So So I'll use some epoxy putty to fill the pitting. First I'm going to use masking tape to mask off all the panel lines. So I've just left the pitted areas exposed. And here I've got some epoxy putty. I'll need some of that up. This stuff tends to stick all over your fingers, so I'll just quickly wash them with some water before I start to work with it. Now I'm just going to press a small amount into the pitted areas. I'll smooth it out, flatten it out as much as I can. Make sure it's really well pressed into the pitting. I'll do the door there as well. And this stuff starts to cure pretty quickly. I'm going to start to trim off some of the excess stuff that I don't need, especially around any panel line details and the side, because they're really hard to rework when you're sanding it and stuff. So here, when it's about half cured, I'm just cutting along where these panel lines are. So I'm going to remove as much bulk of it as I can while it's still semi-hard. Making sure I don't remove too much though. Right, now I'll leave it for another 20 minutes or so to fully cure, and then I can take off the masking. And that'll leave me just with the epoxy putty filling the pitting, but not covering up any of the nice panel details. Here it is with the masking off. Now I'm going to use some of this thin super glue and just sort of soak those areas of epoxy putty with it, and that'll just sort of seep in there and strengthen it up a little bit more. Because often if you just leave the putty and then start sanding it, it'll actually just sort of fall off. Okay, now once that had fully set, I can use a file and sandpaper to tidy it up. This took quite a while actually to get it looking nice and smooth, but there we go. I think that's looking pretty good. The panel shape is still in there. So I've given it all a light sand down as well, and here I've drilled and tapped that post at the front, and now I can start painting it. So I started out with a coat of black primer. You can see the side I fixed actually probably looks better than the other side now. Then I hit it with silver. Here's some candy yellow and dark candy yellow. So I'm giving it a nice yellowy orange fade there. Then I've got some round stickers. I'm going to stick one of those on each side. Here I've got candy orange, candy red, candy magenta and candy blue. And I use these to do a nice night sky fade from the orange into the red, into the magenta and the blue up the top there. And then I can take those stickers off the side. Okay, so that's my sun. Here I've made some tropical palm tree island and a little sailboat decals, and I can apply them over the sun there and onto the front door. I printed out some breaker license plates, and I'm just going to use some watered down PVA to apply those. They're just printed on A4 paper. And I also detailed the engine there in silver. I finished all of that with a couple of coats of nice gloss. Right, so onto the base now. I'll remove those old wheels and rusty axles. And we're not going to be reusing those. So it's looking pretty oxidized and grubby. So it's off to the Dremel for the wire brush treatment. Look at all that oxidation coming off it. And I went through a couple of wire brushes on this actually. And then it came out looking like this. So a lot cleaner there, I think. I'm going to file out the axle bays a bit to make them a bit larger and remove the little tabs where the old axles were held on, and then I've glued in some new axle casings which are made out of some of this brass tube. So the wheels were kind of an odd size. I didn't have any aftermarket ones to match it, so I've printed myself out some here using my resin printer and some black resin. So here they are after I've taken them off the supports and tidied them up, and then I've detailed them, and then I can glue some axles into the back of a couple of them, and then just put them onto the base and glue the other wheels on the other side. Here's the interior. This was pretty good apart from a scruffy nick on the front of the bonnet there. So I sanded that down as smooth as I could. Then I gave it a polish with some plastic polish. And then I applied some plastic reviver to it. Gave it a generous coating of that and let it soak in for a few hours. And here it is. So most of it looked great, but I still think that bonnet looked a bit scruffy. So I'm just going to mask that off and give it a coat of matte black paint. And that's going to make it look a lot tidier. It just still looks a bit scuffed. I think it looks a lot tidier now, and the matte will look good against the shiny body of the car. Finally, here's the windscreen. The rear's not terrible, but you can see the front is really scuffed and quite yellowed. I'm using some 1200 grit sandpaper here and a little bit of water. And I'll really sand down particularly that front windscreen. Try and remove all that yellow off of it. I'll do the rear as well. They weren't too bad though. So here it is after sanding. It's definitely looking less yellowed at the front there, but you can see the sanding leaves it quite opaque. So the next step is to give it a good polishing with some plastic polish. You can go and get plastic polishers at the auto parts store. They're like the polishers you would use to polish your plastic headlights if you have those on your car. And here it is after that treatment. Look at that, it's nice and shiny. I think that's looking heaps better and clear. Doesn't really look yellow anymore. And so here's all the parts of our little Baja breaker, all refurbished and ready to go back together. So I'm going to start out with the interior and the windscreen. It's got a little tab on the windscreen that goes under the bonnet, and then there's 3 posts that press onto the interior there. And then I'm going to hold this back window in and put all of that into the body. Just slip the bonnet through there, and then I can push the rear up and the rear windows clip in there and hold it all in place. And then finally I'll just need to put the base on. So I'll slip it over the tab at the rear there, and then it just slips nicely on, and here's a little button head screw to hold it all together. And that is about that. Just before we take a look at the finished car, let's just take a moment to look back at what we started with. Here it is, all the way from the 80s. A little Baja breaker, looking a right mess there. The worn out old paint job and plenty of oxidation. The windscreen's scuffed and yellowed, and those wheels have seen better days. So let's see if we can give it a bit of a turn around. And here it is, our finished, restored and customized Hot Wheels Baja breaker from 1980. It's had all that old paint and oxidation stripped off, and the pitting and the body repaired and then repainted in a nice sunset island scene. The interior freshened up, and that bonnet hit with a nice matte black. The windscreen's nice and shiny and clear. We've got rid of that yellowing, and of course those nice new custom 3D printed wheels. So I think it's looking heaps better. Maybe ready to pop some surfboards on the top and head down the beach. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Big thanks again to Ken for sending the car over. Thanks heaps, mate. It was really fun to work on. Big thanks to my Patreon supporters for continuing to support the channel. I really appreciate it. Thanks heaps to you for clicking on this video and watching it. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see some similar stuff, remember to subscribe, give the video a like, and maybe a comment. Check out the links below. There's one to my other channel where I do some sim racing stuff, and one where you can get some cheap super glue. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.